Next up, we have moving toward a safer, smarter, and more secure connected home. Okay, well that sounds like pretty much covers it all. We have Paul Plofchan, Chief Privacy Officer and VP of ADT. So let's give Paul a hand.
140 years has taught us a thing or two. People are what matter most, and safety should never be compromised. That's why when it comes to you, your health, your home, and your business, we want you to feel protected. ADT is innovating for the future, and our future is looking smarter than ever. We are securing the connected world and working with new partners, products, and channels. Because what's smart if it isn't safe? Security is what we do. It's what we've always done. And now, we're developing the smart technology of today for your safest tomorrow. Welcome to ADT.
Well, hello. For those of you that were here before lunch, I'm back. I hope you find that a good thing. And I wanted to begin with this Investor Day video that we just recently did. Not to overly commercialize you, but because it sets up a couple of concepts that I want to talk to you about. Plus, if you're in the post-lunch, a little full, I thought maybe Ving would get you to wake up and you'd think something exciting was going to happen here. So I'm Paul, I'm from ADT, as mentioned. I come at this presentation today from my background, where I started it with the Internet of Things from a privacy officer's perspective, and that's how I first got involved with the innovation teams at ADT. What I would like to do is not go back the whole 140 years as that video talked about, but I would like to start back in just a few years ago and putting some context on where I'm going to come from and talk a little bit about 2013. In 2013, in the traditional alarm space, ADT was far and away the market leader. We enjoyed wide market share gaps over our nearest competitors, and it's a good spot to be in. And it was an interesting year, though, because we had also introduced 3 years prior our first foray into using the smart home. And that's a product we call ADT Pulse. And ADT Pulse at that time was allowing our customers to get engaged around a few automations. With ADT Pulse in 2013, you could do lights, you could do locks, and thermostats. It's also an interesting year because that's a year where the market began to enjoy some really big change. For those that follow our industry or may have just been paying attention, that's when some of our we call them in the alarm business non-traditional players, but companies like AT&T with the Digital Life product, Comcast with its product, they came in through horizontal expansion. It made sense. They were leaders in their space. Broadband companies had the backbone. And then, of course, other interesting thing happens. You had some early entrants who had really good home automation products like Google Nest, or Nest. It wasn't Google, but in 2013 it was acquired by Google. And that certainly has helped change the landscape more and put them on a different playing field. That's also the year that HomeKit was announced. And then also later that year, another automation hub and device company was acquired by Samsung with SmartThings. So that things began to look quite differently, and that's continued now through today. And here's just a snapshot of sort of one of the ways that we look at it. Where is it? So this is some idea of who all the players are. Now, I'm not going to take you through that deck or quiz you on it or anything, and hopefully if you represent a company in this space, hopefully we captured you. If not, blame it on me, no disrespect intended. But we tried to capture the various ways that we examine the market and what we face. And I think the takeaway message really there is just how much opportunity is there. As I mentioned on a previous panel, for ADT, there's much discussion goes on as to how much opportunity we have to partner as an opportunity that we have to discuss direct partnerships, or excuse me, competition, to partner versus just being a head-to-head competition. And since this time, we have a number of announcements. Some of them were mentioned by one of our partners earlier, and I mentioned Nest as a company that joined the industry at right around 2013. Well, we have announced partnerships with Nest and August Doorlock that was here and others. So this is sort of the way things look to us, and and what I would like to do here next, if I can get it to change, is show you the pulse system. I wanted to comment on a couple things. I grabbed some notes after lunch. Don't let me come off as unprepared. I'm just trying to tell you things differently than you, some things that are additive to what you might already heard. And I gathered a couple of ideas, and I want to change a little bit. But one of the earlier questions was, is the consumer space, is there money in it? It was the way the question was asked. I want to delve a little bit into our Pulse system. Pulse and these home automation tools, they are enjoying wide adoption. ADT customers, it represents about 1.5 million of our customers today. We have 7 million customers across the US and Canada, 1.5 million of them using one of our 3 suites of technologies. It represents 3 out of 4 new sales. So when customers are coming to us, 3 out of 4 of them want to use automation technologies interface with their security products. And also, from a return perspective, it drives greater user experience, which helps us with retention. It also drives higher RMRs. So getting this right is important, and this Pulse system was essentially the first foray into a mass-marketed security and home automation system, and we continue then to evolve this today. Now, one of the things I liked in the investor video and why I want to return to it, and it reflects some of my comments, is I do think that as you're trying to develop things and solve real problems for folks so that they'll use these systems, they'll incorporate them into their lives, they'll enjoy them, and then it will provide for them greater security, is to think about our customer base over that 140 years, our brand image, what it means to people, what they ask from us in security, comfort, peace of mind. We're trying to evolve our system in that direction. Now that is, as all of you know, and many of you probably know a lot better than me, depending on how you come to this space. You know how I come to it. But a smart home isn't necessarily a safe home. All those devices on the previous graph, all those different service providers, sometimes there are differences, and sometimes the development leaves some things that are less secure. Some of the panelists that I had the pleasure of sitting with alluded to that earlier. So this is sort of where I'd sort of like to give you a little perspective and do a little dive. When I say that it's not necessarily secure, what am I talking about? Well, just as you may be reading in the lay press, in research papers, there are opportunities to improve some very basic things like encryption, like authentication. There are issues around the way username and passwords are managed with some of these, as many of these apps are written, and to help people who have devices in their home control their home, as you can put it. In certain circumstances, you put a device in your home and you acquire the app from a different third party. All these introduce challenges. What I want to do is just spend a few minutes just talking about our approach, and I want to focus on, because it's a pretty picture, is what's in the cloud, and that's also what was alluded to by one of the earlier speakers. So that Pulse for me in my comments represents what we would call Pulse Cloud Services. And through Pulse Cloud Services, we make an effort to address some of these challenges that I just described. It doesn't address all of them. some of they take different types of solutions. Some of them take design changes, et cetera, in the devices. But from a Pulse Cloud perspective, what is it? Pulse Cloud is an API platform that we put on top of our controls, and it allows our customers to securely adopt the third-party apps and then to use that to control their Pulse system. So it gives customers their access to their own, or lets them access their own system. What it isn't is an opportunity for ADT to extend to third parties control over an individual's home system. And you have up here some of our partners. And the lower part of the graph just talks about some of the traditional ways of which we did things with Pulse. Now, the Pulse control system tackles some of the challenges. For example, as a follow-up to some of today's earlier conversations, the OAuth, it uses OAuth, and third parties can't access the APIs without partnership with us. It allows the customers to authenticate and to disconnect the authentication. It allows ADT to disconnect the authentication. And then we also, in our terms of service, working with developers, have additional controls around security and privacy. How have we begun to extend this? Well, in our ADT Pulse, I mentioned we now brought Nest into the ecosystem, Ring into the ecosystem. The August door lock is in the ecosystem. And the bottom part, which is ADT Canopy, is our recent effort. It was announced at CES this January. It's one of the more exciting things we've done in our last 140 years, I think, where it is going to take it takes our 24/7 monitoring and extends those to the products, to other products. So in this case, on the bottom left, you have an LG device, that's a Samsung smartwatch, and a Roost battery, where ADT 24/7 monitoring will be added to those products and allows the consumer to, as this begins to evolve, the consumer to select the products that they would like to have ADT monitoring used on. I think in the balance of some of my time, I'd like to talk about, besides using our ADT Pulse Cloud services and the controls we put in there and our own approval process, I think it's important to revisit something that we hear a lot about, but what does it mean? And that's within the security by design, what does industry forums and standard bodies mean to us in security by design, and are there comments to be made about identity verification and data protection? In an additive way, I think that some of the things that you as developers, if you come at it from that perspective, what you might be looking to there is to think a little more broadly, or I'll say how I think about it. And on the developer side, when we're designing the product, deciding how it's going to go to market, how we're going to test it, the development team is, of course, using industry standards such as OWASP, NIST, United Laboratories, et cetera, to build their various testing mechanisms, balancing that against what we do internally in terms of our own cultural expectations and standards, our own internal requirements. But there's a couple of other additional ones that I think are beginning to emerge, and if you haven't had a chance to read through them, you might think about it. One that I was commented about at RSA and that I've spent some time with is the Online Trust Alliance. OTA has about 31 requirements that they've written up for Internet of Things type devices. You might give that a look. All 31 requirements might not be relevant for you and for your situation, but you might look it over. Another is, since we're here in California, relatively recently, the California Attorney General's office put out a press release, and they commented on a list of requirements that are basic security requirements if you're doing business in the state of California. I would imagine that envelopes many of you. It's something that you might take a look at. There's 20 controls there, and seeing which controls pertain to you. Additionally, on the security by design, some of you may have been exposed to some of the forums that the FTC has run for developers. I found those particularly helpful, coupled along with some of the settlements and things that entrepreneurs and companies have settled with various regulators in helping guide what we should review. And then lastly, on identity verification, there's a lot of buzz about this in academic journals from testing. I think it's something to pay attention to. I already mentioned the use of OAuth and the importance of using tokenization and having that tokenization around sensitive items be short-lived. So I guess as I want to wrap down and then see if anybody has a question for me, just three big picture items again to take out of here is to embed security where practicable, strive for a healthy push and pull between the current state and innovation. As you know, I'm on the policy and privacy side, but I work closely with the innovation teams, and I think it's healthy in organizations to be doing that. And lastly is to embrace innovation throughout the organization. So with that, I hope I found at least a nugget or two you found interesting. And if there's a question, I'd be happy to take it. Yes, sir.
It's a big shift for ADT to do what they've done. What process did the organization go through to reach the point where they understood? Because you should have just died. 140 years old, you should have just died. So what made you figure out what process was followed? Was it deliberate, or was it one guy in the business, or was it you who said, here's an opportunity?
Well, it wasn't me. Though I did get called out at lunch. I do have a smart home. I actually do use the product and can control my lights and doors and video cameras remotely. I think it's the evolution from what the customer and what began to work. Pulse itself was very successful. The uptake of Pulse, the parameters that looking at it is, do the users make more use of their system and enjoy a higher quality experience if they have these added features? Absolutely delivered. I think the development of products, ADT, we don't make any products. So when you married our history, our experience with where we were ready as a corporation with the explosion that many of you are behind, and I detailed on the slide, the timing it's sort of a perfect storm. You have a smart technology that you can monitor and control, and you have something of use to put in there that solves a real customer comment, or a customer need that works. But that was for Pulse, and then I think in a multi-stakeholder approach that involved partners, really good partners, as I've showed you some of the partners that are our early partners. These are top-notch organizations. They help us realize, in the spirit of earlier conversations, that we don't necessarily have to pick what you want to monitor when you get to ADT Canopy, but we can give you a mechanism to monitor it. And doubling down in those areas. Did I answer your question? I mean, okay. Thank you for asking it. Yes, sir.
How do you best engage with your security teams for value versus a roadblock?
That's a really great question. I came from the sales side, and we used to joke that, you've probably heard it, that the whole company's not the sales department, but the whole company better be selling. That's true today in innovation. The whole company's not the innovation team, but you darn well better be innovating and enabling innovation. And so I think a lot of it's not magic, and it takes a lot of work, but cross-functional participation. You got to make sure that you're aligned, that your teams are talking. That's a big one. This is not, I don't think the challenges, at least from my experience with it, haven't been described before. You just have to execute on it. Your time is compressed. The privacy side, many people always say privacy gets away in innovation, that the privacy teams slow down innovation. It's not the case in our structure. Privacy teams at innovation meetings. Privacy team, we're going out to the shop floor, if you will, and sitting right there from the beginning, and trying to be participative about it, and working with the security team. Another thing about the privacy office, is some of you may have heard the term, and I don't mean to be overly verbose, but this may be helpful, The privacy offices are evolving. Some people are saying maybe certain numbers of privacy offices will migrate into being chief data officers, et cetera. I think that whole movement as to how we're trying to work that out is eliminating some of those barriers, and it's an exciting opportunity. And it's going to help customers stay around, and it's going to bring a financial return. I got about 1 minute to go. Anything else? And I'll leave you be. Looks like you'd like me to leave. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I hope I brought you some value. I enjoy being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
You don't want to shake my hand. There you go.
I wanted to shake his hand. What did he give me? He gave me the detonator instead. So let's decipher a little bit of what we saw here. And we talked about it earlier this morning. In each industry segment, there's going to be a major player that's going to try to establish both the technical and the business underpinnings for a platform and an ecosystem. Kind of what we saw here, right? So we're going to take a networking break. Yeah, we're already taking a break. Big part of this show is to get to know other members or other attendees. We're starting again at 2 o'clock. So set your clock. We'll be back here with Tanya from SAP. We'll see you then.